When I was a sophomore in high school, our English teacher, Mrs. Harper, seemed like the kind of woman everyone admired. She was polished, always dressed sharply. And the school board adored her because she made the district look good. Parents complimented her, students envied the kids who got along with her, and the principal treated her like a rising star. But behind all that shine, Mrs. Harper had a cruel streak. She picked favorites, usually kids whose parents had money or influence, and the rest of us, we were just tools for her ego. If you made a mistake, she didn't correct you kindly, she mocked you. If you didn't impress her, she ignored you. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it, but then came the day she humiliated me in front of the whole class. I had stayed up all night finishing an essay, poured my heart into it, only for her to hold it up, laugh, and say, "This is what happens when you don't have real talent." The class chuckled nervously. I wanted to sink into the floor. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just tough, she was cruel. From then on, Mrs. Harper made me her target. It wasn't every single day, but often enough that I started dreading her class. If I raised my hand to answer, she'd smirk and say, "Let's give someone else a chance." When I finally stopped raising my hand, she'd point me out and say, "Oh, cat got your tongue." It was a no-win situation. Worse, she had this way of getting other kids to laugh along. She wouldn't outright say mock him, but she'd roll her eyes dramatically or exaggerate something I said, and suddenly the room was against me. At 15, that cut steep. I tried to tell my dad, but he brushed it off. "She's preparing you for the real world," he said. My brother told me to just ignore her. But how do you ignore someone who controls your grades, your reputation, and your every school day? The worst was during a group project. She randomly assigned me with two kids who openly hated me. She told them in front of everyone, "Make sure he actually does something useful this time." From that point on, my name became shorthand for failure in that class. And she knew exactly what she was doing. By junior year, I started noticing the pattern. Mrs. Harper didn't just happen to pick on me. She enjoyed it. Every smirk, every sarcastic comment, every public humiliation she fed off the power. And the scary part, adults around me enabled it. Parents adored her. Other teachers stayed quiet. The principal saw her as the school's golden star. Meanwhile, I was drowning. One day she handed back essays. Mine had a giant red D on it. I knew I hadn't deserved that grade. I'd spent hours writing and revising. I asked politely if she could explain her feedback. She leaned in, smiled, and said just loud enough for the class to hear, "Maybe writing just isn't for you. Some people aren't meant for much." The room laughed. My ears burned. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, and something changed in me. I realized Mrs. Harper wasn't going to stop. She would keep pushing me down as long as she had the chance. And if no one else was going to step in, maybe, just maybe, one day, I'd have to do something about it myself. That was the first night I ever thought about revenge. By the time junior year was halfway through, Mrs. Harper had done more than just humiliate me in class. She started planting seeds in other teachers' heads. One day, my history teacher, Mr. Lawson, pulled me aside after class. He said, "You really need to focus more. I've heard from other staff that you don't put in much effort." I blinked, completely thrown off. I'd never slacked in his class. In fact, I liked history. But I didn't have to ask who he'd heard it from. Later that week, during parent-teacher conferences, my dad came home angry. He slammed the car door shut and told me, "Mrs. Harper says you're wasting your potential. Do you think this is a game?" My mom looked disappointed. I tried to defend myself, but it was useless. Her word carried more weight than mine. It wasn't just at home or with teachers. My classmates followed her lead, the ones who wanted her approval, mirrored her behavior. They'd roll their eyes when I spoke, laugh at jokes at my expense, or forget to include me in group discussions. I was branded, and the brand said loser, and Mrs. Harper thrived on it. She walked around the classroom with her perfect smile, pretending to be nurturing, while I sat there wishing the floor would swallow me whole. But beneath the embarrassment, something darker started brewing. It wasn't just sadness anymore, it was anger. Every jab, every mocking laugh added fuel. And though I didn't know it yet, I was already keeping score. The turning point came one Friday afternoon. We were doing a creative writing showcase, where volunteers read their essays aloud. I wasn't planning to participate, but Mrs. Harper called on me anyway. "Why don't you share yours?" she said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. "It'll be enlightening." I froze. My essay was personalized, written about my grandmother, who had passed away the year before. But saying no wasn't an option. Reluctantly, I stood up and began to read. For the first minute, it was quiet. Then Mrs. Harper sighed loudly and muttered, "This is dragging on." A ripple of laughter spread through the room. I tried to keep going, but my voice cracked. When I finished, she clapped once, slow and sarcastic, and said, "Well, class, that was brave. Not everyone can turn something so ordinary into 5 whole pages." The class laughed again. My essay, my grief reduced to a punchline. I sat down, face burning, throat tight. That was the day I decided enough. On the walk home, I didn't just feel humiliated. I felt something sharper. I wanted her to feel what I felt: small, powerless, exposed. For the first time, I wasn't just wishing it would stop. I was wishing for a way to strike back. That night, I pulled out my journal and wrote one sentence over and over: "She won't win forever."
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.
After that incident, my mind wouldn't stop racing. During math, I'd catch myself daydreaming about ways to get even. During lunch, I'd sit alone, sketching out little what-if scenarios in my notebook. Most were childish, imagining her tripping in front of the whole school, or her computer mysteriously crashing right before grades were due. But underneath those fantasies, there was something more serious taking root. I realized the only way to beat someone like Mrs. Harper wasn't through jokes or pranks. It was through exposure. She thrived on her spotless image, the praise from parents, the trust from the school board. If that image cracked, if people saw what she really was, everything she built would collapse. At the time, I didn't know how to make that happen. I was just a teenager, barely keeping my head above water, but the thought stayed with me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. And then, almost by accident, I started noticing things. Little things. The way she favored the same 3 students every time, even when their work was sloppy. The way she'd whisper insults under her breath, then smile like nothing happened. The way her stories about herself didn't always add up. For the first time, instead of just enduring her, I began paying attention, collecting details, filing them away in my head like evidence. I didn't know when or how I'd use it, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: one day, it would be her turn to squirm. By spring, my obsession with Mrs. Harper had shifted. I wasn't just the kid she picked on anymore, I was her shadow. I started noticing how careless she could be when she thought no one was watching. She'd linger too long talking with the football captain after class, laughing a little too hard at his dumb jokes. She'd accidentally give bonus points to students she favored, even when their answers were wrong. I once saw her slip out of the teacher's lounge with a bottle of wine tucked in her oversized purse. To anyone else, these were nothing, quirks at best. But to me, they were cracks in the mask. I kept track. A small notebook hidden under my mattress became my archive. Every slip of the tongue, every inconsistent story, every cruel comment. I wrote down dates, times, even the expressions on her face. It was like I was building a case. But I wasn't ready to do anything yet. I was still just the quiet kid at the back of the room, taking my humiliation like always. She thought she was untouchable, and that belief, that arrogance, was my advantage. One day, I caught her in a lie. She told the class she couldn't attend the spring fundraiser because her mother was ill. Later that week, I saw her through the cafe window downtown, dressed up, laughing with a man who wasn't her husband. She didn't even notice me, but I noticed everything. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Even the perfect ones bleed." If there's one thing worse than being bullied at school, it's going home and realizing you can't escape it there either. My parents clung to every word Mrs. Harper said. When she reported that I was disruptive in class, they grounded me for a week. When she claimed I wasn't trying, they canceled my weekend plans. I tried explaining, begging them to listen. But to them, she was the respected teacher, the authority figure. To them, I was just a kid making excuses. The isolation was brutal. My friends had faded away months ago. No one wanted to risk being her next target. I ate lunch alone, walked home alone, lived inside my own head. And yet, there was a strange power in that solitude. No one suspected what I was doing. No one asked why I was always watching. Always scribbling notes. The more I paid attention, the more contradictions I caught. Her husband's stories never lined up. Sometimes she said he was a lawyer, other times, a businessman who traveled too much. She claimed to run marathons, yet I once overheard her telling another teacher she'd never been able to jog a mile. It was like watching a puppet show and suddenly seeing the strings. She wasn't perfect, she wasn't even consistent. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to excitement. While everyone else was fooled by her act, I was the only one who knew the truth. And every new piece of evidence made me feel less like a victim and more like a hunter, patient and precise. One day, I promised myself I'd reveal everything, not just to get revenge but to prove to everyone that they'd been worshipping a fraud. The funny thing about being underestimated is how invisible it makes you. Mrs. Harper didn't think twice about me anymore. She thought she'd broken me, reduced me to the shy, pathetic kid in the corner. That made her careless. She never noticed the way I lingered after class, pretending to tie my shoes while listening to her conversations. She never noticed that when she asked me to run errands to the office, I walked a little slower, just enough to overhear what she said in the hallway. I noticed patterns. She had favorites, the kind who gave her little gifts or ran errands for her, and she rewarded them with inflated grades. She recycled lesson plans year after year, barely making changes. Even though she bragged about being innovative, she thrived on putting students down. But only the ones she thought no one would defend. It all went into the notebook, page after page of carefully written notes, tucked away where no one would find them. But I knew notes alone wouldn't be enough. Someday, if I really wanted to take her down, I'd need more proof no one could ignore. I wasn't sure what that meant yet. Maybe photos, maybe recordings, maybe witnesses. Still, the idea of it thrilled me. For the first time, I wasn't powerless. I had a secret weapon. And she didn't even know it existed. Every insult, every cruel laugh, every smirk she threw my way, it all felt different now. Because while she was busy enjoying her little victories, I was preparing for the day the game would flip. And when it did, I swore she'd regret ever saying my name. By fall, I had everything in place. The notebook, the observations, the little tricks I'd perfected over the summer. I was ready. But I didn't rush. I'd learned from watching her that patience was a weapon the smallest detail could make the biggest impact. It started with subtle things. I'd accidentally leave her favorite pens misplaced, quietly whisper a rumor about a miscounted grade, or make sure students witnessed her favoritism without her realizing it. Each incident alone seemed harmless, but together, it started to create tiny cracks in her polished image. One day, I overheard her complaining in the teacher's lounge about being unfairly scrutinized. I smiled quietly to myself. She didn't know who was listening, but I did. I made mental notes about her reactions, quirks, and fears. Every complaint was another thread I could pull. I also began to subtly protect my younger brother during lab sessions. She didn't see me interfering, but I made sure she never got away with hurting him again. Each time she tried to intimidate him, I was there, silent but present, a shield no one else noticed. What made it even more satisfying was watching her reputation start to shift. Small whispers among students, questions about her fairness, her temper spread slowly. Teachers who once ignored her flaws started noticing, too. And all the while, she still thought she had everything under control. By October, I knew I was close. She was vulnerable, her arrogance blinding her to the evidence I was carefully stacking. I didn't need anyone else to intervene. I had all the tools, and I was finally ready to strike in a way that would leave her shocked and exposed. The day finally came. I had coordinated it so meticulously that there was no room for error. My friends, those who knew the truth, were briefed, ready to act without giving anything away. It started in the chemistry lab. I set up an experiment demonstration that looked perfectly normal. Everyone was watching, including her. Then, subtly, I manipulated the setup so that her oversight, something she often bragged she never made, would be visible to the entire class. As predicted, she made the mistake she thought no one would ever notice. I remained calm, pretending to be the diligent student she adored. But my eyes followed her every move. One by one, students started murmuring, noticing the error. Soon, it was impossible to hide. She tried to recover, but the momentum was against her. Teachers on duty came in to check, and even administrators couldn't ignore what was happening. Her lies, her favoritism, her mistakes, everything became visible. By the end of the class, she was humiliated. She tried to point fingers, but no one believed her anymore. She had underestimated me, underestimated all the small details I'd collected over months. And in that moment, I realized that revenge wasn't just satisfying, it was poetic justice. After that day, everything changed. Mrs. Harper was suspended pending an investigation. Parents, administrators, and students all saw the real her, not the polished, intimidating figure she tried to be. Her attempts to manipulate others backfired completely. My brother and I felt a weight lifted. We were no longer the victims. We were vindicated. The school slowly adjusted, and her presence faded. She eventually resigned, and the chaos she caused became a cautionary tale. I never gloated publicly. I didn't need to. Watching justice unfold quietly, knowing that the truth finally had its day, was enough. It was a victory not just for me, but for my brother, my family, and every student she had ever tried to belittle. Years later, I still think about that time, not with anger, but with a sense of clarity. Sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones who notice everything, and sometimes, patience, observation, and careful planning are more powerful than rage. The school learned a lesson that day: cruelty has consequences. And no one, no matter how untouchable they think they are, is invincible.
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.